What's up, Lore Masters? I'm on vacation this week, so shout out to Fancy Teeth for helping me get this content that you love out on time. Today we'll be taking a look at the Borg, and more specifically, if they were destroyed in the events of Voyager's end game, the series finale. This topic appears to be one that both sides are deeply impassioned about and can get pretty frustrated pretty easily. I mean, if you're like the anti-tracker, you'll be more prone to say that the virus used by Janeway was a game ender for the Borg, that it completely annihilated them. However, I remain unconvinced. Let's try to break down both sides. The primary evidence for the destruction of the Borg is the mass amount of devastation we see at Unimatrix 01. We see a large portion of the Borg fleet randomly exploding, along with the destruction of the transwarp hubs, and again, Unimatrix 01 is just completely gone. Inside the Unimatrix, the Borg react to the destruction of the Queen. She falls on the ground, stating that everything Admiral Janeway has done will be undone once she kills Captain Janeway. And everything we see from the inside, the way she reacts, the way the Borg are reacting, the explosions, just everything that's going on, looks like this would be the end of the Borg themselves. However, there are a few things to note. Not all the ships are destroyed. We see several cubes actually survive along with a specific sphere. And this sphere was operational enough to not only continue the attack on Voyager, but arguably capture Voyager. And if that seems confusing, I'll take a moment here to discuss it. A common argument for the series finale of Voyager is that the ship was actually inside the sphere at the end of Endgame. Personally, I always assumed that Voyager somehow got behind the sphere and attacked from that angle, though I'm not sure how I would have come to that conclusion when I rewatched the end. It makes more sense that Janeway would have allowed the sphere to capture them, pull them inside, and then destroy the sphere from the inside out. That theory is probably a video for another time, though. But when you think about it, it really comes down to how stupid you think the Borg are, the importance of the Queen, and her influence on the Borg. I honestly hate the Borg Queen. She breaks the Borg for me. She makes them weaker and has several inconsistencies. She comes off as a separate entity in a lot of respects. In First Contact, she quite clearly has a separate identity. She has goals, she has motivations with the Borg, and the Borg act on her whims. She does try to say that she's the beginning and the end, and she tries to justify her existence, but it's just not logical. There's no reason for her to be there, and she is obviously separate from the Borg collective. We also observe that she can impress her will upon the collective. Again, in the episode Endgame, the collective is about to assimilate Voyager when the Queen steps in and countermands them. She even states that I will watch over them. As in, a separate entity from the Borg collective will watch over them. So while, yeah, she is clearly a part of the Borg, she is definitively also separate from them. In First Contact, we also know that killing her is not as simple as it seems. When Picard points out that the Queen was the same Queen that was killed on the original Borg cube, the one that attacked Wolf 359, she simply counters that Picard was weak, that he only thinks in three-dimensional terms. And honestly, that's what those who assume the Borg are destroyed are doing in Endgame. They're looking at this from a three-dimensional point of view. We see all this devastation, so they must all be gone, right? But let's sit down and think about this for just a minute. It doesn't make a ton of sense that a species that would claim to seek perfection wouldn't have contingencies for what happened specifically in Endgame. I mean, honestly, you would think that they would have some form of plan, like when we see the destruction of the Queen, her death in First Contact, there was a plan there. There was another Queen she was able to upload, or she existed in another form. So by that logic, the destruction of Unimatrix 01 wouldn't be the only hub that existed. Nor would it make sense that all the hubs would be interconnected with no safeguards. And I know some will try to argue the point that in Best of Both Worlds, it showed that they were all one consciousness. But that could be argued to be a singular cube, and again, the Queen proves that there is some level of disconnection between the Borg and the Queen herself. It's just a matter of what degree. Consider, how do we test new equipment and new programs today? You generally don't hook up a new piece of equipment to your entire mainframe, but you test it out locally. Are we smarter than the Borg? I mean, would they not think this through? It honestly just makes more sense, to me at least, that the Borg would have limitations on the range of the assimilation, for this exact reason. We also know that there are different Borg models when it comes to the Queen. While this is probably just real-world issues dealing with getting the same actress, it does open up some interesting theories for canon. Honestly, it's my theory that this is due to function and requirement. The Borg acts differently based on the model that is present. Indeed, I would argue that the Borg Queen we see in First Contact and in-game is far, far more aggressive and sexual than the other models that we observe in Voyager. It honestly would make sense from a computer standpoint. You have a separate program that deals with situations far better than others, so you just plug and play what is required. Additionally, if we believe some beta canon, it states that an entire species of females were found and assimilated that became the Queen. So it's possible that different Unimatrix and different sectors, different Borg cubes, would have different queens that would have different functions. So let's consider the evidence before us. We have separate queens, we have some Borg ships that did survive, the Borg don't work in three-dimensional thinking. It really all gives heavy credibility to the fact that they did survive. Now, this is going to be beta canon, and let's take it with a grain of salt, but another piece of conjecture for the existence of Borg technology is the Narada. The Narada in the JJ films was a mining ship that was able to single-handedly take a military Starfleet ship. Now, I will grant that the Narada was a 24th century ship, while the Kelvin was a 23rd century vessel. However, the looks of the Narada, its weapon systems, and its abilities are all above what you would consider that of a normal mining ship. In fact, just think how devastatingly crippled it was, and then it was able to fully repair and become even more powerful. It's just kind of odd. If you took a World War I battleship and put it up against a modern-aged mining ship right now, I don't think we would see these similar results. It is possible, based on what we see, that the Narada had Borg technology on it and was a testbed for the Tal Shiar. The evidence, as stated, would be the weapon systems and repair capabilities. This is all confirmed in a comic series, and let me go ahead and address that too. I believe the comic series to be beta canon, but let me go ahead and address this controversy. We do see the Borg in the future in a Star Trek comic series with the Narada, as I discussed, in a different novelization. In Star Trek Comics Countdown, the Borg are seen existing after Endgame. You also have Roberta Orkai, or Orsai, or however you say his last name, stating that his comics and games are licensed and completely canon. This would be a prime example of why I don't really look to screenwriters, producers, or designers for what is and isn't canon. Roberto would later recant his words, saying that he was pressured by the writer to say those things. And honestly, whether he says it or not, it's all moot because we have the CBS executive who is in charge of licensing and has a say in deciding what is and isn't canon, stating quite clearly that something licensed is not canon. Just because it's licensed doesn't make it canon. It has to be on screen. So while I do think there is some evidence that the Narada may have had Borg tech, we don't know, and honestly that evidence is pretty weak. But all of that aside, I do think that the Borg persevered, and that's based on what we see and what we know of the Borg themselves. The evidence seems more for them surviving than not. But those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to help this channel continue to thrive, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/Lore Reloaded. I'll see you guys on the next Lore Reloaded.